I think we can like wait maybe like 1 or 2 minutes for everyone to like drop in and arrive. Thank you all so much for coming to this session, which I think was added like quite spontaneously. So yeah, I'm very glad for everyone who can make it, even though we kind of were short term with this, but the topic is so important. We had, there had to be a session added. So I'm really thankful for the organizers of the Public Climate School that this space could be created. I'm Helena Marshall. I'm an organizer with Fridays for Future Germany. Kind of since the very beginning, I organized the very first school strikes in Frankfurt and have been running around doing climate things since then. And I'm kind of going to be moderating this panel today together with Dominika and Vicky, who are our guests from FFF Poland. And I think maybe you guys just want to introduce yourselves, because I feel like you can do that better than I can. And maybe briefly say, what you're doing, and maybe how you joined the movement, how you got to this place.
Yeah, sure. I can kick us off. So hi everyone, my name is Dominika. I'm a climate justice activist from Poland, originally from a smaller city called Bydgoszcz in the north of Poland, but now living in Warsaw. I was gonna say studying in Warsaw, but just this week I left my university for an unlimited period of time. But I still live in Warsaw and I'm based there, and I've been in the climate movement since 2020, since the beginning of the pandemic, basically, which is quite a different, a weird moment to join, but it was the first moment when, after I left my high school, I was finally able to start doing the work, and I stayed ever since. And I feel it has been over 2 years now, but it feels like a lifetime. And I do primarily work in Poland, especially right now with the Embargo campaign. But I also coordinate some of the international FFF campaigns, like the Stop ECOP campaign that's against Total, so the French company, and many other different weird actions that are happening. And so excited to connect, and I'll pass it on to Vicky.
Hi everyone, thank you so much for being here and being keen on listening to us. So my name is Victoria, and I'm 20 years old, climate activist, also based in Poland. Right now I'm based in Warsaw, just like Dominika, but I'm from Poznań, so from the western part of the country. And I've been a part of the movement since December 2018. So basically since Fridays for Future started in Poland too, and since the beginning. Because at the time there was a COP24 in Katowice in Poland, and I went there to do some cycling stuff, and then I realized that climate crisis is so much more, and started to organize things here in Poland. And since then I've been doing different things with Fridays for Future, and also with Greenpeace Poland on board, because we're kind of working together a lot in Poland towards coal phase out here in our country. And it's been tough, but since 24th of February I've been working very closely with Dominika on Embargo campaign, and we're here to talk about it basically. So happy to be here, and also it's very amazing because in Poland we've been looking so closely to German movement, and we were so inspired by the numbers and how huge it is, and how diverse things you guys are doing. So it's amazing, basically.
Yeah. Thanks so much. And maybe before we completely start into the embargo things, I think you briefly mentioned it. You guys both, as far as I know, dropped out of uni this week to do this campaign full time, and I feel like that is very much a marker of how important this is, and also how how it's changing everything, right? And maybe you can both just briefly talk about that decision and how it feels now, because I there's a lot of university students probably watching this, and I feel this balance of the world is falling apart and everything seems to be in crisis, and getting an education at institution is it's always kind of difficult to find that and to find your place in that. So I think maybe you can just briefly share that experience and how you came to this decision, and how you're feeling about it now.
Yeah, so like to me, it's basically like another decision like in the same topic, because I remember myself, growing up with this vision of me studying in the UK or in the Netherlands. It's like very like often like good students from Poland studying in either England or in the Netherlands. So I got accepted to some unis, and then I decided not to leave Poland, as I found it's super important after my high school to stay here and just like stay with, for example, with Dominika, and build movement here, because it's like so many things to get done. And this decision is, I think that after the war started, or like the war got more real in Ukraine, we really felt that in Poland. And basically Poland became the second largest country when it comes to the number of refugees. And before it was like nothing like that. We had like no migration policy here in Poland. So it's a very new situation to common people, because it's like common people who had to deal with that, and to help people from who are fleeing the war. So the whole world just like fell apart in a moment for me and for us. And I felt that I like last week, basically, like when we were just in Berlin, we were like in this decision making process that, okay, so either we go back to Warsaw and we start to work very hard to pass all of our exams and to have to be like present during our lessons, or we keep on doing this campaign. And I think that what made me realize that I really have to keep doing it is that like it's basically an easy win. I mean, not so easy, but the embargo is on the table. And it's very hard for me, because I know everyone who's working towards this embargo in the world, and it is not a lot of people. And this is a very important political topic right now. It's being talked about in many different political rooms around Europe, and not only Europe. So I felt that now or never. And also I realized that I'm just 20 years old, turning 21 this fall. So it's not the end of the world, and I can come back to the university whenever. But right now, it's just not the place for me to be at.
Well, and for me, I think it's like I've grown up for 12 years of my life. I think education has been the focus of my entire existence, I would say. And I come from a family who's, and I think this we speak a lot with Vicky recently about like coming from Eastern Europe, coming from Poland, what does it mean? And I think one of the elements of that is that our parents, especially my dad, he spent his student life, living in a communist regime behind the Iron Curtain. So his dream was always to study abroad, because for him, like Germany, the rest of Europe, the United States, whatever, it was like a promise of freedom. And so when I was born, he kind of, because he couldn't study there, like he kind of put that dream to me. And so in my family, like the focus on education and getting good grades, getting good achievements, writing good, application essays for unis, all that, which is super important in some way. Like for me, it was like the priority, and it would always be about like, everybody in my family would say like, oh, Dominika is going to go to like, the top unis and so on. And I dreamed of that, or at least I thought that should be my focus. And then I remember when the pandemic happened and I joined the movement, it was at my it was my senior high school year, so it was the final year, and I was like, okay, so I got accepted to a uni and like an American university, and I was like, yeah, so like let's do this like Fridays for Future thing for the summer, and then in autumn, obviously, like I need to go back to like the serious stuff and go back to go to NYU. And then I was like, then it was August, and I was like, just about to start packing to leave for studying abroad. And I was like, okay, well, let's just take a gap year and let's continue doing this for a year, because this seems like, and I was doing it in Bydgoszcz. It's like a super small city, so it's not big. But for some reason, it felt like real, and it felt like serious, that I was taking like treating what happens in the world seriously, that let's just, devote more time to it. And then the gap year finished, and I was like, well, I still have this obligation to go to university. Let's stay in Poland. Let's drop out, drop this NYU stuff, and let's study in Warsaw, because obviously, I have to get a diploma. And then I started studying at Warsaw University, which, the system of education in Poland is still based in the communist era. So it's completely outdated, really, really strict on students and so on. And so, I kept going for the past year. But then when the war in Ukraine happened, I think it was a few elements. The beginning of the second semester really aligned with the start of the war. And then I got completely sucked, and I got I think it was for me living in Poland, it was the bombs were falling 15 kilometers from the Polish-Ukrainian border. So it was it felt like on the 24th of February, and also given the refugee crisis that we're in, the refugee inflows that we have, it felt like our country is also part of this war. We're really stepping into, mobilizing in response to it. And so, my whole life became about stopping the Russian fossil fuel money flows, getting Europe off from Russia, from the dependency on Russia, and also really getting the billions of euros to stop flowing to Putin, because we know that he bases his power on fossil fuels. We know that if it wasn't for the fossil fuel industry, this war wouldn't be possible. And so it became because I felt I'm part of this war too, and my part is the fossil fuel aspect and really stopping this money. And so it became really a task. And then the IPCC report came out saying that we basically have to stop the increase of emissions by 2025. And so we really have 3 years to do that. And so it really felt kind of, what more can you ask? What more crises do I have to see to finally say this is enough, and to finally say I'm doing what I can, and to treat those crises seriously. And and it has been 2 months or over 3 months in. And it wasn't a surprise that it happened, that when we were in Berlin, that this decision came around, because when we went to Germany and we spent a few days in Berlin trying to, push for the embargo to happen there, and we realized how massive of a opposition is to the embargo there, and how hard it is to achieve it in Germany. Then it came to me that this is bigger than my university obligation. This is bigger than me getting my diploma in 2025 or 2024. Now, really, if I am to turn some things around, it is now. And maybe by doing this, just prioritizing this work instead of, the list of essays that I was supposed to write in May and June, maybe I will have a chance to actually use any of my education and any knowledge, and have any chance for a living actually in the coming years. And now, after the decision is made, it suddenly is so obvious and so right and so easy, because it's of course it's more important. Of course we have to do everything for this fucking embargo to happen. Sorry, oh my god, I'm not sure speaking at you should say that.
No worries.
Of course my teacher from sociology, or the best I think is my philosophy professor, who tried to explain to me that no matter if I confront Macron, I still have to come to fulfill my end of the year essay. Of course he is less important than doing this, and we have to put all hands on deck to make this happen and to turn things around. But I know how hard this decision is, and I think many of us still, we are so living so many years being fed this belief, this narrative from our parents, from our families, from the society, that without a diploma we cannot say anything, or we cannot be treated seriously. This really is so empty and so so inadequate to the crises, the wars, and all the really oppressive reality that we are living through, that to me it just I came to a point where I'm no, like I will not stand any of this anymore. Like I will not sit at my desk. I will not listen to any of this ancient philosophy classes. There are things that are just more key now.
Yeah. And I think what I really want to like emphasize for everyone listening, like we're not telling you all to drop out. Like that's not necessary. But what we need is everybody, like feel like the world is like it's filled with compounding crises, right? We are growing up in the midst of a pandemic and the climate crisis and huge social inequality, and now this war like happening like not that far away. And I think it's so easy in reaction to that to hide, right? To say this is all too much and this is all too stressful, and so we need to like and to like just focus on yourself and to like ignore the world and like to no longer take responsibility for what's happening around us. And I feel like I understand that reaction, like honestly, because it's really scary what's happening all around us. But I feel like what you're showing is that the opposite is also possible, that like grounded in community and in movement, when we know like we're not doing this alone, but we're doing this together, to like turn and face the crises and to like say enough is enough, and to recognize that if we don't do anything now, if we don't stop this like fossil machine that like is destroying people and planet, then it will just continue to get a lot worse in the future. And I feel like that is like that for me is the big takeaway, to like remember that we can take responsibility for our present and for our future and for the world that's happening around us. So thank you so much for like talking, like sharing that today and like bringing that into the space. So the embargo, the thing we're talking about today. I looked up the counter, and so far since the beginning of war, since like Putin marched into Ukraine, since the 24th of February, Europe has paid over 52 billion euros for oil, gas, and coal from Russia. What does that mean? How can we how did it come to this, and why is it that fossil fuels are so interlinked with violence, and why we need renewable energy as a part of peace?
Okay, well, I mean, I think I haven't checked the tracker since like 2 weeks, I think, because we've been so deep into the work that like we were obviously like aware, it's like 800 million euros every day. We repeat this in the media every time. But I think hearing this number, 55 billion euros, like to me, it's still like you hear all of those actions, all of the like the donation drives, like you hear about people like collecting like thousands of euros, millions. The European Commission is proposing 10 billion euros to Ukraine within the coming year for reconstruction, and then you hear that 55 billion euros have been sent just like that to Putin in the past 3 months, literally directly fueling this war machine. Like it's still like it overwhelms and amazes me so much, because this is really the problem that we're talking about. It's about the fact that under those slogans of stand with Ukraine, solidarity, we have to isolate Putin, we have to help our Ukrainian sisters and brothers. Our politicians, just like with the climate crisis, they are totally okay to keep business as usual going. They are totally fine to, tell us that, they are doing everything, that they are, showing support, helping out Ukraine, that the Ukraine is Europe's most focus, but still allowing and directly committing and blocking any efforts to stop the flow of the money for the fossil fuels. Putin is like, I think, I realize not many people know it. And I think up until the war, many people, were completely, didn't realize, but Russia is a fossil fuel state. So the economy of Russia is primarily based on fossil fuels, on extracting them, on selling them, and making global profits from gas, oil, and coal. This is, when it comes to numbers, I think it's over 40% of Russian economy is just fossil fuels, which is insane. Like, it is really a fossil fuel state. And Putin, especially, and his oligarchs, so his cronies, his friends, have first of all, they own the fossil fuel industry. So it's not, the profits from the fossil fuel industry, it's not the profits to the whole people of Russia, because Russia is, an extremely poor country. I mean, the people of ordinary citizens of Russia is living in extreme poverty. The industry itself is directly owned by oligarchs, by Putin, and by this whole system of like autocratic, inhumane people in power, basically rich people in power. And so that's about Russia. That's about Putin. That's about Kremlin. And like, this is, the Russian empire that Putin built is based on fossil fuels, on exporting them, and especially because Putin and Kremlin, they are very far from respecting any human rights. They are an autocratic regime, an autocratic government. And so we, especially living in Eastern Europe, we know more than well that Russia, since decades, it has been far from, a peaceful country that has, peace and human rights on top of their agenda. I think it's quite the opposite, is that the government, and Putin himself especially, has a trajectory and has a decade of history of war crimes, human rights abuses, and of colonizing, exploiting, and attacking other nations, including Ukraine. But that's on Russia, as I said. The other part, and this is something especially we as Europeans, as members of the European Union, we have to pay even more attention to, is the relationship between Russia and member states of the European Union, including Germany and including Poland. And what we are facing right now, those 55 billions of euros flowing to Putin since 24th of February, is the result of decades of extremely close connection between European Union, between Europe and Putin and Russia, based on the fossil fuel dependency. And why I think it's so extremely key that we speak about this in Germany is because Germany especially has been one of the most heavily connected and dependent on Russia country in the European Union. The connection, and especially on the fossil fuel friendship that German government, German power, CDU, Angela Merkel, and many politicians and the current government have built is one of the the closest, and especially when it comes to the money value, one of the biggest support system for Putin, basically. So as we in the European Union, as we in Germany and France and Poland, we call ourselves the free world, the lands of freedom, of democracy. We're standing for human rights, we're guaranteeing safety. Like, we literally fuel and continue building friendship with a dictator, with an autocracy, and we continue building our economies and our democracies on fossil fuels that are now the tools of destruction and are now the tools of of war crimes in Ukraine. And I think with kind of all of each of the euro that flows to Putin right now from the European Union is directly upholding this really destructive system, and is leading to tragedies in Ukraine. And I think what to me strikes the most is that before, obviously, at least in my case, I've been speaking about fossil fuel industry, like we've been fighting against it in Poland. It obviously, everybody knows it's like so bad, it's so toxic, it's really bad. It leads to destruction, crises, tragedies, human rights abuses all around the world. But to see this happen so closely, like to see all of those mechanisms of toxic power happen literally in our member state, in our countries, and this affects people that live next to us, the Ukrainians, like it couldn't have been more obvious, like how wrong this system is. And that is why I think, the fight for the embargo, the fight for, this stop to this toxic relationship between Europe and a dictatorship, a fossil fuel dictatorship, is much bigger than, you know, a piece of policy, you know, like a decree that European Commission will one day announce when they announce a full embargo, also including the Gasembargo. Like, it is a much bigger fight than we think it is. And that's why, especially in Germany, it's so key that, like, you know, that we push this fight as much as possible, and that we fight for the embargo as much as possible, because it is kind of a fight of, you know, finally saying no to decades of supporting autocracies around the world, to decades of supporting human rights abuses and war crimes, and to decades of supporting a fossil fuel industry whose main aim is just profit over people, destruction over anything else.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for that. I feel like I want to just emphasize that of all European countries, Germany spends the most money on Russian fossil fuels per year. And we've known this, right? Like, this was a relationship that was curated over years. Every pipeline that was built, every like industry contact, right? So what, like a lot of what happened, like for instance, BASF, which is like a huge chemistry company in Germany, what they did is they had a very strong relation with Gazprom, right? Which is like the Russian state-owned gas company. And what they did is they made these agreements where they sent Gazprom technical parts, and in exchange, they got cheap fossil fuel contracts, which are over years, right? That's the worst thing. These are take or pay contracts is what they're called, which means that they agree to a certain level of gas that they have to take, that they have to use every single year. And if they don't use it, they have to send money to Gazprom anyway. So this is where we see that this is like these are lock-in effects that were created. These are like relationships that were sealed on paper, right? That bound these European countries to an autocracy. And like, you know, we in Germany were fighting against Nord Stream 2, which is like a pipeline. They were like, all these decisions were made. Like, I feel like what I want to emphasize is that like no one is surprised, right, that Putin has marched into the Ukraine. Like, it is terrible and it is horrible, but this is not something that came out of nowhere. Like, he has been an authoritarian for years. Like, he annexed the Crimea like in 2014. Like, this is not something that like that came out of nowhere. And yet, even after 2014, like these relationships continue, right? Like new gas storage tanks were sold to Russian companies, and that's something that we, I think, have to like really recognize, and as like especially like a German movement, that that our government has played such a key role in making the situation that we're in possible right now, and that needs to be recognized. And then we need to make a plan where we move from here. And step one of that plan, I think, is what you're rightly pushing for, is an embargo, is a stop to all oil, gas, and coal imports from Russia, and a stop to the flow of money that is going to fueling this war. And I feel like, you know, that's part of our responsibility as well. You were in Berlin, I think last week, right? And you like met different politicians, and you talked to a lot of people here. And maybe you can like speak about what the starkest difference is, like especially like coming like from Eastern Europe, right? Coming from Poland, where I can imagine that the mood is very different at this moment. So maybe you can like talk about what surprised you maybe most, what made you angry, and like what your observation is of like the situation in political Berlin.
Well, so I think like the biggest misunderstanding is that, like what you basically said already, is that we are not surprised that it happened, and Ukrainian people were on this war since 2014, since April in 2014, when like the war in Donbas, so in the eastern part of Ukraine, started. And you know, when you think about it in that way, that in April 2014 there's war starting in Ukraine, there's Russia attacking Ukraine, attacking even civilians there. And the year after that, in 2015, we're having a contract on Nord Stream 2 like happening. It's so ridiculous. And when you think about it in that way, you meet with these politicians and you look at them, you talk with them about like how all of this, like how is it possible? You know, Fridays for Future were not present at the time. We were, you know, like in middle school or so. And I think about it that, you know, we see these politicians and they seem to be surprised that it happened. while like the whole politics was based on neutral like approach to Russia and to Putin, because we didn't want to judge them so much. We were thinking about the conflict happening there, like the source of power and so on and so far. And here we see like the clear outcome on politics that is based on not speaking up when you see that authoritarian regimes are attacking other countries, when you see that it's like geopolitics that it's like basically based on putting people under profit, like putting profit over people. And I think that it's basically like the same mechanism we see in climate crisis in general, that we are like, yeah, it's not so bad, it could be worse. Like it's not like there's like the whole like full-scale war happening in Ukraine. That's what we were thinking in 2014, in 2015, 2016. And then in 2022 the war happened on full scale, and people our age are fleeing this war, and this like full-scale war happening in like the middle of Europe, where we were like promised that it's not going to happen, that we are going to have like war never again in ever in Europe. So I think that the fact that European Union and especially Germany was backing it up since 2014 is something that we really need to highlight, and also we highlighted it in the conversation with politicians when they try to tell us why they cannot decide on this embargo and why it's so hard to decide on this embargo happening. And I think that like the first thing we need to do right now, and the first thing we also mentioned to your politicians too, is that we need to deputinize this economy, deputinize like how our system basically. And when Dominika mentioned that 40% of whole Russian economy is fossil fuels, so when we think about like what happened to other 60%, these are people like this cutting off from 60% of Russian economy had like an enormous effect on common people of Russia. People working at like some H&M, McDonald's, and so on and so forth. These are basic, common people of Russia, and this 40% is money that flows directly to oligarchs. And we need to see that while cutting off only the 60%, we make oligarchs even richer, and we make gas, oil, and coal from Russia even more expensive for us. So we pay them more for the war they are creating right now at the same time. And I think that also it's very important to remember that the embargo and deputinizing this economy and deputinizing our energy system is like the first stage, and we need to remember about like what has to happen after that. So for example, Polish government, which is like basically leading right now towards embargo for Russian fossil fuels, is thinking about and is dealing with Saudi Arabia, Venezuela, and so on and so far. And these states are not democratic countries as well. So like what we're doing right now, and what European Union is also doing, is looking for fossil fuels in different places around the world, and is looking and starting to pay other oligarchs, other autocrats, other petrocrats basically for their fossil fuels, and they start to fuel other regimes. And when I think about like the whole racism going on when it comes to the war, we get the whole debate why European Union is so touched by the war in Ukraine and is not talking about Yemen, for example, about Syria to such extent. We are not going to, like, if the war would outbreak in, I don't know, in Saudi Arabia and Venezuela, we are not going, like, European Union is not going to put so much pressure on these states as it's putting so much pressure on Russia right now. So we need to cut the source as soon as possible, and we just like need to do everything we can to go 100% renewables right now. And it's not only for climate crisis for this moment, it's also for peace, not for justice, but for peace. Is like super basic right now. So
yeah. And I think that's like I think if there's a positive note, it's that, right? We have solutions. This is not a problem that we are unable to solve. Like renewable energy, decentralized renewable energy, will reduce emissions, will stop the climate crisis, and will also stop our funding of autocracies all over the world. And like that isn't like, this is not, and I feel like that's really important to emphasize, like the newest IPCC report said very clearly that we do not have a technical problem, right? This is not like this transformation is good. It's not going to be easy, but it is absolutely technically doable. What we have is a problem in the implementation, right? Because we have fossil fuel interests, we have lobby interests, and we have political interests that keep on the intent to like keep on fueling and keep the system going. And like what you guys are doing, like you've been like in Paris the last weeks, you confronted Macron, you've been in Berlin, you were in Brussels, I think, in between, as like, right, you are taking these steps to like kind of stop this machine that is destroying so many things. And maybe we can, like you can talk about like where we're at now, like what is this moment, what has happened until now, and like where do we go from here? What do maybe people who are like listening to this conversation who are recognizing how important this action is, how can they, like, what should they be doing to stop this from keeping going?
Yeah, no, that's very valid point, and I think the most important question, because the time is against us, and we really, as Helena mentioned, every single day this sum is getting bigger and bigger, so we really need to act fast. But I just wanted to kind of go back a little bit to your previous question to Vicky. What have been the main takeaways from our visit and work in Berlin? I think and that's why kind of this decision to drop out uni and everything kind of it broke out from that, is because my biggest shock when I was in Berlin is that I felt like the movement isn't there in that fight, and we so often look to FFF, especially from Poland, where the situation with the climate movement has been so tricky. Like always to me, Fridays for Future Germany has been this, just like, up there, like doing stuff no matter what, and doing them at a scale and, with like a power that I would dream of in Poland, to see that. And then we were in Berlin, and we were like, okay, can we do like action together, or maybe just bring people, meet people, like speak about this, like like, because to us in Poland, I mean, we've been for 2.5 months, we've been like mobilizing people, like speaking. Everybody has been talking about the embargo, and like you go to Germany, and like we were with Vicky and with other with Irina Bilai, so another Ukrainian activist, we were there, and we were kind of just like, who can we talk to? Where are the people? Where are the organizers? Where are is it something going on about the embargo? Why aren't things being done about the embargo? We hear, obviously, we've heard that the debate was taken over by the companies, the lobbyists, some like really crazy people that have completely over kind of emphasized how the embargo would be catastrophic for the economy, which was obviously bullshit. But like, where are the people to stand up against that and fight for this to happen if it is so clear to us that it must stop? And I think, like, I've been trying to understand where are the people and why things aren't moving, and I think I have some of my kind of hypotheses on that. But I think two things that strike me is two things that I think we might be onto something. Is one thing is that not all of the people still understand that the war in Ukraine is inherently a fossil fuel war. It has been possible because of the fossil fuel industry, and it is fueled by profits from the fossil fuel industry. And very often we come to the climate movement and we say that we're here for the climate crisis. And obviously, like, I'm there for the climate crisis as well, but and very often we view other struggles as separate. But the war in Ukraine is not separate from what the climate movement is about. I would even say, like, it is fundamentally about what we're here in the climate movement. We're here to stop the fossil fuels. We are here to secure people's lives. We are here to put people over profit. We are here to fight for justice and fight for peace, because climate crisis is inherently about peace being disrupted. And standing up for Ukraine and standing up to that war and standing up and fighting for the embargo is what we in the climate movement, I think, from my perspective, what we are doing and what we're supposed to do. But I think creating this link it takes a minute, and not everybody understands that. And perhaps, as in Poland, where, from one day to another, we as a country also kind of had to step up to that war. We got that quickly, but I think what we are now trying to do with Victoria is really to translate it further, because I know that this might not be, that easily understandable to other people, and that's fine. But we have to ensure that this link is made as quickly as possible, and that we really step in and fight very, very strongly, because this is probably, I'm sure about this actually. This is the biggest political battle that we are facing now. Everybody's talking about energy, everybody's talking about fossil fuels, everybody's talking about, the energy transition. And we have, as a movement, as a climate movement, be that for the climate crisis, or be that for peace in Europe, like we have to step in very, very strongly and firmly into that debate. But I think we're struggling a bit at the moment. But second hypothesis of like where the problem might be is actually it occurred to me when we went to one of the, I think it was Parents for, or Omas for Future demonstration in Berlin. I was invited to give a short speech there at what was supposed to be like a regular bike ride, or and I was asked to speak, and I went and I started speaking about me coming from Poland. I've had two stories about Germany kind of repeated to me for my whole life. One story was about the Berlin Wall, Berlin Wall falling, freedom flourishing, and Germany becoming, the heaven of democracy. And the other story was from my grandparents, or from my grandma, because who would repeat to me and tell me about the story of the Second World War, and how so many of her family members were killed by the Nazis, were killed in concentration camps, or died on the front line trying to fight in the previous most deadly war in history. And that was the story of Germany being the country where that previous biggest destruction initiated. And I am aware that from conversations with many of the friends from Fridays for Future Germany, and just in general, we know that in Germany, as in Poland, we've been for decades, forced to learn and to repeat this mantra, we must never let war repeat, that there must never be any war again in Europe, because we know what trauma and what tragedy the war brings with itself because of the Second World War. But in some ways, I felt that at that demonstration, where many of the people actually, they were very like shocked when I started, to speak about those two stories that I've had from my family. Some grandmas even left, said that they do not want to listen to it. I think, something that we need to speak about is the fact that, this lesson from history, or maybe differently, that now is the test whether Germany has learned that history lesson, whether, a country that has had a history of leading to such destruction and tragedy can now stand up rightly to yet another war in Europe unfolding. And so far, it's been challenging, but I think there is so many amazing, good, incredible people that know what that history lesson is about, and that know what direction we must follow, that we will get that embargo. But I think we need to move quickly, and given the FFF Germany's force, like what we agree on, what kind of what understanding we have, and what willingness for change we carry, like we must make that something much bigger in the German society, because so far it has been the biggest funder of the war in Ukraine, and that must change if Germany is to prove that it learned the lesson.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think I forgot to say at the beginning, if you have any questions, if you're watching, you can add it to this. I think they're going to put the link probably on the screen, and you can add your questions there. But we can just keep talking, I think, and see if more questions come. And if not, I think, all of what you're saying is so valuable in itself. Yeah, so I feel like we have a lot of work to do, right? And so what are the next steps? What are you guys going to be up to?
So this week we're basically here in France to say goodbye to Emmanuel Macron as the the one that holds presidency in European Union right now. And again in June, it is Germany who's going to be and it's Olaf Scholz who's going to be holding the presidency since then. So we're thinking that we are for sure going to be back in Germany soonish. And we also really, really, really need to press as much as it's like to put pressure as much as possible on those who are responsible for both like doing that in the history in the past, like creating this situation and remembering about like the source of this whole addiction to Russian fossil fuels and in general to addiction to fossil fuels. So we need to hold politicians responsible for that, but also we need to do everything to put embargo on both Russian oil and Russian gas as soon as it's possible. And for that, we also need like the German society, so you guys, to join forces and to do everything to like be super direct with your politicians and tell them right away that yeah, what has to be done for peace, for climate justice, for social justice, for the world that we want to live in, the world that we were promised to live in, is cutting off Russian fossil fuels for now and doing everything to go towards 100% renewables as soon as possible, and to have energy that is based on peace and not on war. And we also need to remember that like all the time fossil fuels, like in the history and right now, fossil fuels are always creating wars and disaster. We're seeing that when we think about global stuff and what is creating it there. We're thinking about it when it comes to climate crisis in general and how fossil fuel industry is still fueling it, even though the science is super clear about that. We cannot, have new power plants that are based on coal or on gas. We're still doing that, and politicians are still on like this path towards nowhere or path towards catastrophe. And this catastrophe is like happening all around the world right now, not only on global stuff, but also just next to Poland. And when I think about bombs falling from the sky, 30 kilometers away from Polish border, so from European Union, it feels so I feel so angry about it that we are still, just letting it happen, because that's basically what we're doing. Because you cannot say that European Union is like responsible for this war, or I don't know, is the one that created that, but it is responsible for not doing enough or not doing anything basically to stop this war right now. And it should have been stopped in 2014 and in 2022 too, when it like became much more aggressive from the Putins and from the Russian side. And also what I feel is very important, and it's super different in the Western countries than in the Eastern Europe, is that like the whole debate is like completely different. And when you think about how we talk about Ukrainian people here in Poland, how we talk about this war, how we talk about how it was initiated and what is happening in Ukraine right now, we've seen images of Bucha, and if you haven't seen that, you have to see that. It's a big trigger warning, and it's like these are the pictures that I was thinking of in the history, that there are like some things that could happen in the 40s, but not right now, in 2022, when we're talking about climate justice, we're talking about equality of gender and so on and so forth. And it cannot be still happening, because that's like the promise that we were given and that we gave each other after Second World War. And also when I see that in Germany, in France, in Western Europe in general, we are having like a discussion over Russian-Ukrainian conflict. We want to like have them debating on stuff. It feels so ridiculous, because you cannot you cannot debate with fascists. And also what I read today, and I think it's very, very important, there's like this professor at Yale, I think, Timothy Snyder. So he's like basically a person who probably maybe heard of him, is a professor that is working very, very closely on how to not, let authoritarian regimes take over Europe in 21st century, and how we can learn a lesson from history from 20th century. And he basically, in this article, he's saying why we have to acknowledge that Russia right now is a fascist state, and it is an authoritarian regime based on like the same, idea that Nazi Germany was based on. And I think that especially in Germany, with like the whole historical responsibility and the whole knowledge and the whole lesson that was taken, and I know it was taken by you guys, you have to like acknowledge that it's super important. It's your fight to fight right now.
Yeah. Well, yeah, thank you. Yes, Dominika.
So maybe if I were to add to Vicky, I think a few key things. First, I think to me, one on getting some priorities out there and getting some political key moments that are coming up that we should look into. First, about the priorities, I think there are some very ground rules that I think we have to establish, especially among ourselves, among people from the climate movement, that this is not Ukrainian-Russian conflict, it's a war. If we are to be precise, it's a genocide, because this is what our friends from Ukraine are naming it, that this is a genocide. Second of all, there is this common I think misconception in Germany, especially in German old political class, that there isn't Russia is necessary for peace around the world, for good relations with Russia are necessary for peace in the world. I mean, you cannot negotiate with Russia if it's led by an autocratic regime that it doesn't aim for any peace, doesn't aim for any stability. For now, it aims for destruction. And so we have to be clear on how we treat countries or state governments that are, not interested at all in any peace. They are interested in grabbing Ukrainian land and killing Ukrainian people at the moment. So this must be a ground rule, because we have to do this in order to first really stand up with people in Ukraine. Really, this is about like the nitty-gritty of what solidarity is really hearing and listening closely to what the Ukrainian people are telling us, and these are some of the things that they are telling us. So I think it's really key, for us to be serious about this war. We have to name it the right way. We have to, look closely into what the debate looks like, and to see closely when it is, falling into the business as usual or politics as usual, rather than really politics and actions that are aimed at true peace and justice. And second of all, when it comes to politics, I think next week we are next week, or in 1.5 week, there is going to be a special European Council summit related and focused on the war in Ukraine and Europe's actions towards the war, and what we have to keep fighting and building even more power and pressure is the gas embargo. And this is really the fight, the oil embargo, to enforce it truly, but most importantly the gas embargo, because it is the gas that Europe is most dependent on from Russia. And that's the fight that we are dealing with now. And so really, gaining forces and doing actions around the European Council Summit to make our voice, a strong voice from the climate movement, heard is extremely key. But now, and this is on to the German side, the G7. We know from the political analysis that G7 will be about the war in Ukraine. And the way we tell the story around the G7 summit, it can have a tremendous impact. And and right now I'm hearing some like really weird stories about Olaf Scholz proposing some climate club. I mean, like, come on, like, let's be serious. If we are serious about what's going on right now, about the multiple crises that we're facing, G7 must be about ending the era of fossil fuels, about ending friendships and support for autocrats around the world. speeding up the transition towards renewable energy, towards peaceful, democratic, renewable energy, and really proving that we stand up for democracies, peace, and justice around the world, and not for autocrats and their fossil fuel tools of power. So this must be, we have to formulate a story for G7, do it globally, do it definitely with MAPA activists and with Global South and Voices centered, but really now is the moment to ramp up our actions for what might be the biggest fights over the energy system that, in the coming years, which we know are crucial if we live in the formative decade. And so I hope that the climate movement in Germany can be a strong voice in that. But I think what is even more exciting for me is to see that we can amplify the solidarity work between us. Eastern Europeans have been leading or doing their strong part in that fight, but we have to do it together. And I believe that there are some potential, who knows, maybe 2022 can be the year where we finally and make a strong mark on Europe's dependency on fossil fuels, and we really speed up the renewable energy just transition. I can imagine that happening. Like, that can set us up for decades, but it must be done with people on board, and not with the movement kind of being unsure whether we should do something or not.
Yeah, this is it's the historic moment, right? Where we have all these crises coming together, and it's an absolute turning point where either we can continue feeling these crises, we can continue having the world fall apart, or we can take a stand and say enough. And this moment now could also be could start the decade of solutions, where we stop this process and start building a better world. And I feel that's I think very nerve-wracking, right? Because this moment is so important and so heavy, but also so I feel it's so hopeful in a way that we know that everything is possible if we put our minds to it, and if we get enough people on board. I think we're kind of coming to a close. Maybe you can just each briefly say the last thing that you really want people to take away from this, the most important thing that when people go into their evening, go into the next day, is that they should keep thinking about, that they should take with them.
Well, I had the honor to start on that. These are big words. I think I don't know, to me, the past 3 months have been, about daily repeating the same thing. Let's stop fueling this war. Let's stop giving tools to dictators. Let's, take the chance and do the right thing, meaning ramping up the transition towards renewables, because it is I think the first step towards peace and towards climate justice as well. But I also feel maybe this is because the uni dropout is that we live in such a the current reality of so many crises. It's so oppressive and it is tough. And I think maybe it is also right now a moment where we can let go of some of the fears, of some of the restrictions that we have been living under, trying to fulfill all of the expectations, which are just, surreal expectations if we are living in the decade of such climate crisis, and just, let loose and have fun, and at the same time, make this shot, just this tryout, turning things around. Maybe it will work out, maybe it will not, but at least we will know that we tried our best and we did what we could. And I think, if it is dropping out from uni, just let's try it out, let's experiment. We have nothing to lose, honestly. At this point, given all of those crises, we're losing everything every single day. So we had nothing to lose, but we can gain everything. And I think this is what I feel, and I hope, obviously, this is not me calling for you all to drop out. I really would love to return to university because I love studying. At the end of the day, I love that. but now the priorities are just different, and you know, I'm taking my best shot at trying to turn some things around.
Yeah, I also think that, you know, for us right now is like really the story that it is us who should be telling you guys, because like no one would do it for us, because on the one hand we've got Ukrainian people who are just fleeing the war, who are, you know, like their first priority has to be their safety and has to be fighting against this war and, you know, dreaming about the victory soon. And on the other hand, we've got Western countries who are not going to get it because they don't have like the Soviet history behind them. And I felt that like this, for the first time since I'm in the climate movement, and as I said, I'm here for 4 years now, and it's super crazy actually. It's, you know, it's the first time that I think that the story that I'm talking about, it is really my story. Like it's my private story. Like whenever I wake up every day, I feel that it is a story that I need to talk about all the time. And what Dominika said about repeating ourselves all the time, about stop fueling this war, you cannot give the tool to the autocrats to kill people in Europe or anywhere. I think it's the story that would not be told by anyone else. So it's also a great responsibility. It's a great privilege to be able to do that, but also it's a great responsibility to be the one who you know, like really gets it, really understands it, like from the very, very, very bottom.
Wow. Yeah, I don't really want to add anything to that. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us and for all the things you're doing. And thank you so much to everyone listening. I hope you take this conversation with you, as I will do in the next days. And yeah, think about how we can play a role in the world right now, because we have so much to win and we have so much still to gain and to build. And yeah, I'm really excited for the coming weeks and months. And yeah, everyone have a wonderful evening. And I think that's it.
And thank you, Helena, for moderating.